The first question he basically had was, how can a person train to improve their stance? And the key is basically know why you're doing the stance and know exactly what the purpose of the stance is. A common thing you see in Chun stance, let me put this down for a second, is people interpret things differently, and that's fine. You want to interpret it your way, you can do it whatever way you want. But often with the YGKYM, you see people say that they tuck in. You got to tuck in the stance, and by tucking it in, it makes it solid. And before I went to my teacher, as far as what I can recall, I believe I did that also as far as forcing that tuck in with the hips. But what I wanted to show you is, Ken's going to demonstrate here. He's going to go from the side view. And I understand why people say that the tuck-in works, tuck-in makes it soft. Just stand natural first. Okay? Do your YGKYM, but just do the tuck-in. And a lot of times you'll do the tuck-in, like Ken brought up, open up the stance. And I do understand everyone's got different variations on how to open up the stance. But, for example, when people do the tuck-in, the most problem that people have is they tuck in and they have that slight lean back. You always see that. So, for example, Ken does a tuck-in versus, like this. Not a little over exaggerated. They just tuck in. Okay. Now, can you see, if you look directly at how his stance is, he has a slight lean back. Now, is that bad? Well, it looks like he can hold the stance. Even if I push it, see? He can hold it pretty well even with that tuck-in. But in reality, you're not knowing exactly what you're involved in with the YGKYM. YGKYM is to learn how to control, maintain your center. And what does that mean? That you want to basically hold from the head all the way to the hips a vertical line. Okay? So even if you do the tuck in, but you're leaning back like that, you can hold some force. See how I hold some force? The problem is, when the force is great, and I push him back, he'll fall back. You'll see that automatically lean back like that. The actual development of YGKYM, now let's do it again. He does the tuck in, okay? Now, watch what I do. He's going to adjust himself so he's actually tucked in, his hip is tucked in, and now straight. Now, watch how he moves himself into the center. Down a little here. Now watch. See? Just as solid, but he's holding himself straight. Now, what's the difference? When the force comes in and pushes him, he won't fall back. He'll move back, but what will he do? He'll maintain himself vertical. So, for example, he moves back vertically without leaning back. That's the key as far as knowing what to do when you're doing the YGKYM. So hopefully that explains it. Don't misinterpret the tuck-in. The tuck-in is not this and a lean. And you see that all the time. People do tuck-in and lean. You tuck in and lean, it can hold. But the problem is, if you get the force too strong, you'll fall back. Okay? If you want to take off and actually do an attack and you're tucked in, what's going to happen? It's hard to go off and chase to run something down. So the tuck-in can't be done in that same manner. Okay? Another question he has is, how can a person improve their rooting? Well, let's understand what rooting is. Rooting is basically, a lot of times people misinterpret the Wing Chun stance as something as, okay, I'm rooting and I'm going to be solid in the stance and that's it. In a real fight situation, you're always moving around. You don't root and say, I'm here, planted in place, and you can't move my stance whatsoever. Okay? So, for example, in this situation with the YGKYM, when I push against his chest, that's the only time he actually roots. See? Otherwise, he's actually pretty relaxed. If he pushes with his feet, what happens? When I push the force against him, he'll feel it on his feet. Hey, what's up? Oscar. So anyway, from there, every time the force comes in, he's actually rooting. You're not rooting all the time with your stance. You want to be able to actually move around in free will when you do your stance. Okay? So, as far as the rooting is involved, anytime you apply a technique, in other words, when Ken does a punch, and I block, right there I'm rooting for that split second. Okay? I'm not here in my YGKYM stance, I'm rooting and you can't move my stance. In actual application, you try to do that, you're going to get your ass kicked. But in the actual application, when he punches and I block, that's exactly when I'll be rooting. Or for that second when I'm here and I do my attack, that's when you're applying the rooting. So don't misinterpret the stance as far as I'm going to plant myself in here and you can't move my stance. Okay, that is not the actual, from my point of view, how you actually root. Best ways to improve your stance. Well, besides knowing what you're doing, for example, when you practice the slow cow form, okay, you're doing the whole entire form, okay? And a lot of times what happens is you're so concentrated on the hand techniques that the next thing you know, all of a sudden you're leaning here or you lose your center. So my suggestion is have that awareness constantly when you're doing any kind of drill. If you're, for example, if you're chi-sawing, you get so heavy chi-sawing, you're just like leaning here or you're leaning back and so forth. You obviously lose the purpose of it. You want to do everything, even with the concentration and focus on the stance. Without the stance, you won't be able to apply anything that you want to do. He asked also, let me see how much time I have. He asked also how much, what does it mean as far as finding your center? As I said before, everything is development as far as finding your center. So in other words, let's say Ken has Tanzao. He has a Tanzao, okay? And then, let's say he leans back a little bit to apply the technique. Just a little. In other words, he doesn't have his center. Tanzao, look at his hand structure technique. It looks okay. It looks actually okay. In other words, the force is here, it looks like he can hold. But notice how, if this, you have three body structures. You have the leg, the body, and then the arm. And when it's connected together like this, and he has a slight lean back like this, notice how, if he holds this technique out, see how he has to use muscles to hold that technique, and you see the shaking in the stance from that. Now, if he puts himself into the center, puts himself, the center, relaxes here, puts it straight. Now look, when I push onto his stance, look how his stance actually, you can actually see him, see the movement in his hand into the body and into the legs as far as supporting the actual stance itself. So from whether it's going, the force is coming this way, or I pull it slightly forward, you'll feel that, sideways and sideways. That's exactly how you want to do it as far as how you develop the stance through many ways, not only from chi-saw, but also from the form. So a lot of times, just don't do the form where you go here and just moving your hand. Okay, that's just wasting time. You actually have to know how to connect and unite all three body structures together, from the legs to the body to the arm. Finally, the last thing is basically the stance itself. If you look at the stance, okay, I'm going to open up the stance for a second here. Okay, make it look natural. Let me move back a little. Make it look natural as far as how the stance is applied. Notice how here, you don't squeeze it in like this, or do something awkward to hold the stance and make it sound like you're sinking or making the stance more solid. Everything you do in Wing Chun should feel natural. If you're feeling pain with the stance itself, your stance is off. In other words, the best way I always say for people to practice a stance is in front of TV. Instead of sitting down and watching TV, spend the first 5 minutes opening up your stance and watching TV. If after 5 minutes of watching the show, you feel yourself go like this, stretching out like this, and then that basically means you don't have your center. The center defined perfectly and control this. You could be here for 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes, and you'll just basically make simple adjustments. See, I'm making just small adjustments with my stance, because once you have the center, that doesn't mean you have it all the time. It's like driving a car. You drive the car, it's going straight. You don't let it go, and it'll continue going straight. You're still constantly making adjustments, even if the road is still straight, to maintain the car. Same thing with your center. You hold your center in place, and then each time you're constantly, everything inside you is still moving, you still control yourself and constantly find that balance, okay? If you feel any of that discomfort in the stance whatsoever, and I'm talking about soreness here in the thighs, or in the back, or upper shoulders, that means you definitely don't have your center there. And then in time, remember, the center is, Wing Chun is not rigid. You will not fight in a stance. If a fight situation occurs, you don't stand in your stance like this in YGKYM and then just apply your technique. Once you have your center, you can move around just like any way you want. Just like if you were playing basketball, football, or any kind of sport. Once you can move and have control of your center, that's the main goal. Make it natural and still maintain the structure of your stance.